All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So you just noticed I started the recording. We are going to record this so that we have it, and we'll make this available on our website. So we can also make sure we capture any comments or notes for this. But thank you all so much for joining us for the Price public hearing. DHCD is hoping to put in an application for this program, and your comments and input will be really valuable in helping us flesh out our application and think through how we best potentially take advantage of this opportunity or how we can best represent the state in this funding effort. My name is Matt Weaver. I'm an associate director here at DHC in our policy office. I help a lot of our programs think through program implementation as well as ideas for helping us reach a lot of the goals we have in Virginia for both affordable and preservation of affordable housing, as well as thinking through the infrastructure, community development, and economic development opportunities. Um, this is going to be a somewhat short presentation. We want to make sure we leave some time to get your all's feedback. But we have the chat feature in Teams. If you're not familiar, on the top, you'll see a little chat icon. If you click that, it'll pop open the chat feature. You can ask questions in there. You can also wait toward the end, and we can have some time where you can pop on the mic and ask your question or throw your comment out to us. You'll notice that you are muted currently. You will have to unmute in order to speak. So with that, we'll get started. So as I said, it's going to be somewhat quick. We're going to really just talk about what the Price Initiative is, our application through the Department of Housing and Community Development, and then hear y'all's thoughts and feedback for that application. So if you are not familiar with the Price Initiative, it's the Preservation and Reinvestment Initiative for Community Enhancement. Good old HUD program, long name, but we can have a good acronym for PRICE. But this program is really designed to help look at, recognize that manufactured housing is a critical piece of our affordable housing options within the nation and definitely in Virginia, but also take an opportunity to hit some of the spots where other federal and state funding have missed, provide direct funding for manufactured home units and the manufactured home communities that those units sit within. We just got notification a few minutes ago that they've increased the amount. So it's now $235 million available through this Price Initiative. $210 million will go into what they're calling a main pool. We'll go through some of the items available on that. And then 25 million for a pilot program. And that's really targeted at some communities that are having significant impacts in targeted kind of approaches. So the main pool is the $210 million that DHCD is going to potentially be going after. So as I mentioned, it's for manufactured home parks, and it's to support the low and moderate income and truly sometimes the extremely low income communities. The major activities that are eligible are going to be the repair and replace housing units, repair or replace the infrastructure within these communities, and then the services such as eviction prevention or housing counseling that help wrap around and support those living in these manufactured home communities. And so just a quick synopsis of kind of what we're putting in our application and some of the case we're building as a state for applying for these price funds. And I'll preface this, but this data is pulled from Census Bureau. It's the American Housing Study, and some of the data is these communities are hard to get information for. The publication recognizes that there is some inaccuracies or different aspects of the data that don't meet standard publication standards. So this data may not be exact. It's a pretty good representation, but there may be some additional opportunities. So recognizing that we may have more than 133,000 units within the state, that's still a significant number, but to the point that we need as many affordable rental and housing units as we can across the state. Maximizing all of these units could be, preserve a significant portion of affordable housing options within the state. Some of the median occupant, or sorry, some of these data says the median occupant age is about 59 years old. Definitely not old. 59, I believe, is the new 45, but it's definitely showing that we have a more aging population than a lot of families in different aspects that would bring that number down. Uh, so uh, 16% of manufactured units are in what we call, or what HUD defines as large parks, 21 units or more. This data says that about 75% of all mobile home or manufactured units are actually on individual lots or within 6 or less units. Um, that is an interesting point when you think of urban and rural areas and how these units might be sitting. And then lastly, the median manufactured home value is about $62,000. The main takeaways from some of this data is one that the state needs as many affordable housing units as we can. We have to preserve what we have, but also need to be creating more. And manufactured homes are some of the most affordable options in Virginia, as HUD defined across the nation. Um, the last point on this is that a lot of these units are generally non-equity building. The average prices for when they're sold, $62,000, you probably can't buy even a used mobile or manufactured housing unit currently for that, and be able to transport it and place it. But for $15,000, you can get a pre-70 and then about 80,000 if it was built less than 15 years ago. So those non-transferring equity is a big deal if you have to move or if you need to find a new house or dwelling. So as we were mentioning, some of these units are for some of the most extremely low income communities and residents we have in the state. So median income for manufactured housing units is about 22,000 a year. The median housing cost is about $550 a month, and the monthly rent about 400. Those numbers may sound like lower when you think of rent and uh, housing costs in other parts of the state, but when you're only making 22,000, that's a significant aspect of your yearly income. So a lot of these communities and units are cost burdened. And this map, while we see a lot of the map indicates the colors more toward orange or yellow indicate the percentage of manufactured housing units in association with the total housing units available. So in some of our rural areas in South Side and Southwest Virginia, uh, manufactured housing units do make up a higher percentage of the total houses available. However, there is a significant population or amount of these mobile home communities in urban and suburban areas that may not represent a huge percentage of the locality's housing options, but they still represent a significant population, percentage of the population. So all that was kind of building toward what we at DHCD envision a price application looking like. And so we're proposing to put a request in for $25 million and operate a statewide competitive application round out of that. So if we ask for 25 million, we're allowed to ask for up to $10 million in admin. That would be an up to, and that admin would help support this program for the 8 years that it's allowed to, 7 years that's allowed to, run and be complete. And we'll get more on the timeline in a minute, but that's where that 10% comes in. Um, we're proposing to potentially do this in 2 rounds. And so having $11.25 million available per round. And that would be a maximum award of $5 million in hard costs. So that's going toward the actual unit replacement, infrastructure, and the wraparound services that could go into an application. And then additionally, it'd be 100,000 on top to actually do the administration and the compliance associated with these. So the maximum award would be $5.1 million potentially. If your park only needed $2 million, then your award would be 2.1 million, depending on what the costs are going to be. And so what we're proposing for that 5.1 or up to 5.1 is you could do essentially these slides are going to be similar to what HUD is allowing us to do with price, but a little more in detail. So bear with me for the kind of tons of words, but we'll go through this. So it can be for the construction of modular or manufactured housing, can be for the repair, rehabilitation, or the reconstruction of the housing units, the improvements to accessibility of the units, And then the acquisition of manufactured housing units, manufactured housing communities, or lots within the the manufactured housing community. But that activity must be compared with construction or rehabilitation of the units. It cannot be $2 million just to buy a manufactured housing community. Um, One of the big initiatives in the state currently, and Virginia Housing I know is on the call, but we as a state agency and Virginia Housing have been partnering, or we have some potential funding to look at communities that could buy, the residents could buy their own community and become a cooperative or their own kind of entity to control and manage their community. So that idea is out there, and this could help support some of that, but it has to be in association with replacement of units, rehabilitation of units, or infrastructure costs. And so then toward the infrastructure, installation or improvement of infrastructure that serves the community, and that can be water and sewer lines, the hookups for that water and sewer, broadband. It could be drainage, road work, any aspect of the infrastructure that's going to support those residents that live within the units of that manufactured housing community. Uh, technical assistance, Technical assistance and capacity building can have various forms, but would be more of a soft cost and a wraparound service. And then we mentioned the administrative costs. They can be on top of your award or within the award, depending on what you need. And then the last two kind of bullets are a resiliency area. So improvements for resilience to natural disasters at manufactured housing communities, enhance resilience of infrastructure to extreme weather, natural hazards, and disasters, installing flood or drainage improvements, weatherization and safety enhancements of units, and then lastly, testing and remediation of contaminants. All of that can be a focus within the kind of resiliency realm of these applications. And then some of the non-construction dollars, but definitely worthwhile operational activities is the voluntary support services. So relocation assistance, housing mobility counseling, eviction prevention, down payment assistance, and home buyer education, and appraisal programs, and then lastly, assistance converting a community to a resident controlled entity. All of those are eligible under the price application that DHCD is putting forth. And so then lastly, the eligible applicants for these funds through DHCD's program would be units of local government, planning district commissions, nonprofit organizations, or those resident controlled manufactured home communities or cooperatives. Those are the four kind of buckets of entities we would be willing to take on. That does not include for-profit entities that own communities that need to do rehabilitation or work. But if there is an opportunity for that last bullet to come into play to create community or cooperatives, potentially that could be an application. As I mentioned, HUD just modified their notice of funding opportunity to say the deadline for this program this application pool is going to be July 10th. It was early June, then mid-June, and now we're into July. So summer is starting to creep in already. This timeline doesn't reflect fully that late July date, but to the extent that all timelines are based off of the award date, this can be a rolling idea for what we're expecting. And forgive me for all the words, but we'll go through this kind of in detail. So if we put in an application in July, we would expect hopefully to hear back at the end of the calendar year from HUD about an award. So that way we'd be able to, in December into early 2025, January to February, work on our program development tools. That would include kind of input sessions and then some writing of documents that we could share with stakeholders or groups that were interested for better feedback. That would lead us into an application period. So hosting how to applies and different aspects of what the application would look like of July, August of 2025. So a year from now, we could be rolling out our first application round with reviews happening throughout the fall and then awards and announcements made by the end of calendar 2025. If we were to do two funding rounds, basically that same calendar year would be duplicated. So A second round would start in July of 2026. And then by the end of 2026, December, we would have awards. Contract negotiations would follow in um, early the following year, whichever round was, so that hopefully these projects are all up and running, whether it's round one or round two. Everyone's has a contract and funds are obligated by September 2027. Sounds like a long time, but we're envisioning some pretty complex projects, and taking opportunities to really fully invest in these communities could be um, worthwhile, but may take a little while to get to that contract phase. Uh, we do envision that once we're under contract, we can move faster than having all construction projects completed by September 31. That is what HUD defines as a requirement of this program. Um, we would all want to be a little better stewards and try to maximize the opportunities so that we could move a little faster. But the effective date is all construction is done by September 31 and all projects are closed out by September 32. We would adhere to those guidelines in the process. So this is the point where I've blazed through the information we're throwing out there. I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts, comments. We can go back and circle back to slides and information. If you want to unmute, you can. If you want to throw a question or a comment in the chat, we can read it out. We have several different ways, and while y'all are thinking about it, we have several different ways to communicate to us. This slide has hyperlinks, so when this is on our website later this week, whoops, um, you can use the email comments feedback link at dhcd.virginia.gov to email us comments. You can send them directly to our Associate Director, Chloe Rote, or to myself, Matt Weaver. And then lastly, we have the draft application to where you can review what we're putting in there. And as we make changes to that, we can update that link so you can see what we're trying to propose and how we're doing it. We have to we're going to keep this public comment open until next Friday. It's about 10 days to allow people to weigh in if you'd like, and then be able to also make changes ourselves. So does anyone have any thoughts or feedback, questions, comments? Absolutely. And Miss Ritchie?
Hi, I do have a question. With regards to the program development, would the project require you to sell the homes to low to moderate income families, or could an agency utilize it as a rental property to rent the units?
And Chloe, back me up, but I believe the intent was to allow a nonprofit or an entity to potentially have rental, like so we could replace it as long as there's a contract and agreement of who you're renting to, so that the end beneficiary is a low to moderate income, household or family.
That's
Chloe, did I get
correct.
that
And
right?
there are um, two pieces of this price application. The first is our actual application to HUD for the price funding. And the second that you will see referenced in the application that we have drafted and posted online is that the Virginia General Assembly last week passed a budget bill that allows DHCD about $5 million to go towards a pilot program that would be acquisition of mobile home parks or mobile home communities, as they're referred to in price, by not-for-profits or cooperatives of residents. So those pieces are sort of intertwined, and I think our goal with this statewide application is to provide as broad an ability for organizations to apply to this funding as possible. There are also several applications being made to HUD directly from Virginia entities, so planning district commissions, nonprofits, and so forth. So this is meant to sort of supplement those application activities that are on a more per park or per community basis, where we would hope that if Virginia were awarded statewide funds, we would be able to create an application process that best leverages any other projects in the state.
Thank you.
Matt, this is Chase Lauderback. I want to thank you for putting this together. I just had a little bit of feedback and some thoughts if there's a moment.
Sure, absolutely.
Can you hear? Okay, I'm sorry, I'm on my phone, so I can't see if you can hear me or not. But yes, thank you for putting it together. One consideration, maybe as a thought, I've got a unique property. We've actually been in contact previously. I've got basically an 80 space park in Pulaski County, Virginia, that's got some unique infrastructure issues that's not allowing me to expand. So if there is even a thought of maybe allowing potential solutions where private owners can take part, because it's, rough estimates. I've got septic systems that need to be connected to city sewer and water supply issues that are on the county side that myself and the county are trying to work through, to where, that's my current occupancy is in a little bit of, I wouldn't say threat, but that's potentially needing to be preserved, and also the opportunity to add another slice of 55 plus affordable houses or affordable housing units, brand new mobile homes. And if a county is kind of backlogged with all their other applications, if it's possible for private owners to apply as well, then that can help make sure that we're not missing this opportunity and fully revitalizing some of these other communities that are privately owned. So any thoughts on that? Has there been any conversations about some mechanism or something for that?
Yeah, I
So-
appreciate it. Go ahead, Chloe.
The restriction on private entities not being able to apply comes directly from HUD. Private entities
Okay.
are non-eligible entities, and that is based on the NOFO issued by the federal government.
Okay, so if the county is willing to apply, do you know if there's hard income survey requirements, or is it possible that in this situation, a general census tract or showing that it's impacting a mobile home community will be good enough for an application with DHCD if Virginia was awarded?
The NOFO from HUD requires that we show LMI benefit. It's very similar to the structure of CDBG funding, where it is not required that every beneficiary be low to moderate income, but we are required to show low to moderate income benefit. Generally speaking, we haven't been awarded funds and have not built out a formal application process, but I would imagine that the process would be very similar to DHCD's CDBG process now, where we would require some beneficiary specific information, but a first round application by an entity would not necessarily have to include like that personally identifiable information of existing residents.
Yeah, Jason, that's a
Okay.
good point. We don't have the application developed yet, so that this is an initial kind of thought, and there'll be opportunities if we're awarded to fully flesh it out and to figure out more what we need to collect and how to pass that on to you to be as competitive as possible in a potential application.
Okay, perfect. Because that's kind of the plan, is applying with the county to try to remedy these issues together. So I appreciate that feedback, and really like the direction HUD's going in here. I think it's a great thing for affordable housing for Virginia and the nation. So just wanted to provide that feedback too.
Yeah, thank you, Chase. Miss Beijing, and then Alex Long will come to you next.
Thank you, Matt. The slides went a little quickly, so I may ask you to repeat information you've already shared. But did I understand it correctly that when this DHCD is able to be awarded these fundings, and then you turn around for the round 1 and 2, that the manufactured units that are created could be available for rent or for home ownership?
Chloe, correct me if I'm wrong. Yes, I believe so. It's one of those of I don't know that I had that on there actually. Chloe, you want this one?
Sure. So it is required that there is a low to moderate income benefit, but
Sure.
while DHCD has not fully developed our application, there is nothing that would prevent these from being ultimately rental units. And in fact, that is a consideration that we speak about in our draft application because of the financing structure of mobile home parks being difficult to secure like a deed of trust covenant directly to a mobile park, a home owner, because often they do not own the land and they pay a lot rent, which makes that piece of the financing structure difficult. So that is an potentially eligible within the NOFO issued by HUD.
Okay, and I probably shouldn't, thank you for that, Chloe. I probably should have prefaced my question that if the developer comes to the project in their grant application with having already acquired the land or have it under a sales contract, then the land could be sold, so to speak, with the manufactured unit to a prospective home buyer. That would be allowable, correct?
Hesitate to provide such specific guidance here because the NOFO is quite long and we at DHCD have not been awarded nor have we formalized our application process. I don't know that that is disallowed, but I also don't know that that would be permissible within an application should DHCD be successful. What I would say is that that's quite detailed. And so if you could put that information and any requests around the structure of the application into an email to that feedback.ppc@dhcd.virginia.gov, that would be the most helpful for us in reflecting your comment in the way that we structure our ultimate application.
Okay, I might have to get that email. I see where it is. All right, just go ahead, Matt.
No, I was gonna say it's awesome. And to Chloe's point, that those details will help us then flesh out what we're going to do and how to really bring this, if we're awarded, bring this funding to the maximum opportunity. So that's an awesome thought, and we're hopeful we can get there and think it through with you. What's next on you?
That'd be great. My second and last question for now has to do with the type of manufactured unit that is used, because there's certain design requirements that are enforced for metropolitan areas versus in rural communities. And the entity that I work for has both in their GSA. And so I was curious, as an example, and I don't know a lot about manufactured homes, to be honest, but sometimes you have like a single wide versus a double wide. So are there any restrictions that you are writing in or that the NOFA has already delineated to you that you guys have knowledge of regarding the type of manufactured unit that is eligible to receive this funding from the applicant?
So again, this is a place where the NOFO is really broad. The goal of the HUD program is rehabilitation and new units. It's preservation, but through multiple mechanisms. So if there is a specific request and this is for clarity's sake for all folks on the hearing, our draft application is really just answers to narrative questions. And so if there is a particular concern that you have around your prospective application or something specific to your locality, like something around what are the allowable, making an application more narrow to better suit your locality, that is the kind of comment that we are looking for. That really helps us to update our draft application to put in more specific information about potential applicants and potential partners should DHCD be awarded. And it also helps us guide those application-specific things that would not come up until we were issued an award.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Long, did you want to ask the questions that you typed in your chat or just go to the chat? So basically, he was asking about some of the guidance or potential template for converting a manufactured housing community into a a cooperative. And so we don't have a template yet that I'm available or aware of. I think we would, there's again some state funding that's going to potentially assist with some pilots that will have some best practices or potentially some guidance coming out we can share with you and with this group as we continue forward. So, Mr. Moss, then we'll go to Mr. Abbott.
Thank you, Matt. First of all, I've got just a couple of things, but as you were going through the presentation, you were talking about manufactured housing. Then you said the use of manufactured or modular housing. So just for clarity, modular housing would be acceptable in this rehabilitation or housing unit development program.
So kind of to Chloe's point, it is focused on manufactured housing and the preservation or replacement of it first. I don't know that we are, it may have been a slip with using modular, but I don't know that it's necessarily completely off the table because the NOFA I don't think says it can't do it, but it's probably going to be manufactured and more preservation replacement of the existing as opposed to taking down a manufactured home and then putting in, a modular in its place.
Yeah, I only ask because, well, we're deeply involved in some modular housing production through some of our other programs here at the PDC. But I have been talking with 2 different localities about the possibility of revitalizing a couple of mobile home parks within their areas. One of them we're looking to see about purchasing soon. And you talked about a co-op, and we were talking about doing it kind of as a planned unit development, which would work very much like your co-op, have the units be owned, but the property not, but the units would never leave the property. So the people would own the units, lease the property, and then leave. So work very much like what you talked about. So it's very interesting. Threw up, I guess, the flag to me, and I was thinking of also looking at and thinking of a way to do a pilot program using the new manufactured housing duplexes in one of the parks that we were looking at. In fact, doing a study now just to see how it would work in one area. But putting the duplexes in to, I guess, increase the amount of green space that is combined together within the park to make it feel more open and then update it as well. So using that duplex type product. So it's very interesting. I'll look to see what comes with it, and hopefully we'll be able to do something together.
Yeah, and it's one of those that there may be opportunities for the classic term braiding funds or bringing in other funds to do activities that may not be eligible for price, but using price for infrastructure or different activities. So there might be some opportunities in the future, but kind of to Chloe's point, once we have a chance to dive into what's the program going to be for Virginia and how we do this, using the NOFA as a template, but then making it more case in point to what Virginia needs, then maybe we can think through that and what's most opportunistic at a kind of how to apply or a thinking through project development phase.
Well, thanks a lot.
Go to Abbott, Ms. Walker, and then Vaughn will circle back to some of your questions. Abbott?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Just 2 quick questions. I guess the first one being, I thought when I read through y'all's draft, there was something there. There was a priority given to projects that are looking at resiliency, particularly environmental. And maybe I'm crossing with another project. But was there a preference given to that? I know we've got some projects areas that are near to reservoirs and low-lying areas. I didn't know if that would give preferential treatment. And then the second question was, what would be other than income, is there going to be any other eligibility criteria for the occupants of these homes? I'm just curious whether that's going to be an issue going forward with the population of some of our projects.
What do you mean by occupants, and give me a little more detail?
Do they need legal citizenry status in this country? Because just what it is.
Okay, thank you. Chloe, you want to address the resilience or priorities? Any priorities we note in our draft?
Sure. So one of the primary overlaps that we found in our preliminary research was that particularly those areas that are more prone to flooding or more prone to flash flooding, as is common in Southwest Virginia. As you saw on the map that Matt presented earlier in the presentation, there's quite a bit of overlap between those issues of environmental damage to communities and the incidence of high proportions of mobile home ownership or living conditions. So like Matt mentioned, the braiding of funds, luckily for Virginia, many of those areas that are identified as high proportion mobile home communities in terms of the amount of available housing, those are areas that are considered non-entitlement communities, which means that we would have the ability as a state agency to leverage our CDBG funding infrastructure. That is something that we're doing in a couple of parks on different projects right now, where the locality applies for funding to improve wastewater, stormwater runoff, indoor plumbing. All of those are eligible activities under the CDBG program, and then we would be able to braid it in with actual replacement for the price funding. So that is something that we are looking at. DHCD a number of years ago had a program called Vibrant Communities Initiative that was sort of a precursor to what could be happening here, which is there is state money for housing developments. There's federal money for housing developments. There's CDBG funding for infrastructure or services and some housing pieces as well. And then combined with the availability of that $5 million pilot for acquisition and the potential of price funding, we would be able to braid together those funding resources whether through one application or by working to provide technical assistance to organizations to do that on their own through multiple applications to DHCD. So we haven't established what the resiliency criteria would be, but we certainly recognize that that is something that dramatically affects the population that we're hoping to serve with the price application. And it is something that we contemplate in that original application draft as being a scored component of a final scoring metric or a preference component.
Ms. Walker, want to ask your questions? While she's getting to the mute button. Chloe, Von Pollard asked about, let's see, if you replace a unit if you replace in a unit for an LMI household, is the funding a grant or a loan? And then would deeds of trust be required?
That's a great question. The requirement from the NOFO is that we preference applications that provide for at least 15 years of affordability in the unit or in the eligible activity. And there is a greater preference in the NOFO for activities where the affordability is held out for 30 or more years. So there would be a mechanism for securing the investment of the price funds without knowing the particular structure of an application to DHCD for price funding. It's hard to say if it would be exactly a deed of trust because the financing of mobile home parks can be multi-layered with different site owners, landowners versus homeowners that pay then lot rent. So I can't confirm if it would be exactly a deed of trust. Our draft application says that, again, we're trying to make it as broad as possible. So we would preference applications that had a longer period of time of guaranteed affordability, but we would be relatively flexible with applications in how, what the mechanism is for that affordability. And I think the same is true of like grant or loan funding. Typically, our loan funding even is a very low interest rate or no interest rate, and it is repaid on a pro rata basis based on how long affordability is maintained. So for our single family programs, if they follow the home investment partnerships rules for a different HUD program. And what that means is that for typically 10 to 15 years, there is a silent second mortgage on the home. So it is considered a loan of funds, but there's no payment due, no interest accrues. And if the full amount of time passes where the recipient of that funding maintains the home as their primary residence, then that funding is forgiven at the end of 10 or 15 years or on a pro rata basis if they choose to move prior to that. So even if it were a loan, it would not be a typical amortizing like mortgage loan. It would have very forgiving terms because the purpose again is to serve primarily those at or below 30% AMI, those older adults, those with high incidence of disabilities, where we see the greatest impact would be in Virginia in mobile home parks.
Thanks, Chloe. Ms. Walker, were you able to get your mic working?
I think so. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, great. Hello, Matt and Chloe. I did a program down in Danville, Virginia, called the Choice Home Program with Virginia Housing. What the Choice Home, well, it is a manufactured home. If we did like a pilot program here in Martinsville with those Choice Homes and then took the funds and then sold those homes, but then took the funds to take them back into create within the city of Martinsville could. And I want to sell and then take the money and transfer it back into a ownership program where we can continue to keep that money flowing and create new communities. So is HUD saying yes to that, or is it strictly rentals or cut for a program that could be homeownership? I know we talked about it in the beginning, but I just want some clarification.
It kind of broke up a little bit. Are you asking if you can take some of the choice funds and transfer it from Danville to Martinsville and use it in conjunction with this price funding? Is that the question?
Well, it's not transferring any funds from choice. I'm just saying trying to duplicate that same program, that pilot program in Martinsville, and then taking those funds and reallocating the funds after we sold the house back into the home ownership program, dedicated program where we'll build even more communities.
Okay.
The beginning funding, is that what you all are going to try to put in the application when you send your draft to HUD?
Well, I think again, to Chloe's point, we're being as flexible as we can and thinking through other federal and state fundings out there. I think we'd be flexible in working through different projects that might, do it. But Chloe, do you have any to add?
I know you all kind of asked the question before and everybody. I was just want to be clear if you were going to concentrate any on home ownership, or this is definitely strictly rental.
We don't.
I
We are not.
apologize. Oh, go ahead.
Well, so in our application, we're not dedicating any amount of funding toward homeownership or rental outright. We're trying to be pretty broad, and then thinking through what opportunities may exist with other funding and other local or regional initiatives, priorities, different activities that are happening, at a much smaller scale than the state. We'd be happy to think through that in the kind of development of the program materials phase. So we're not going to limit ourselves with our application to say we're only going to serve X percentage of rental or X percentage of home ownership. We're going to try to keep it broad at this stage, and then narrow it back down at least narrow it down a little bit more at the how to apply kind of aspect, which we'll have additional input sessions to think through that. And and then be able to bring other state and federal resources to that game too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Chase, did you have another question?
Yeah, just two really quick. I apologize, I missed. What was the maximum award that could be done per year if the DHCD gets the price grant? It was split up into 2 years. Was
Sure.
it 5
So
million?
5 million, and then an additional 100,000 can be for administrative purposes.
Okay. And I know there's no way to tell, but have you heard any rumblings of if price may become an annual or more frequent solution there by HUD, or is this kind of a one-off thing?
I have not heard. Chloe, you may have heard differently.
No, HUD hasn't issued guidance on that, and I've been on a couple calls where people have asked directly and they sidestep the question.
Okay.
And you can, I mean,
Gotcha.
you probably know with some of the, national talk, it's an issue across the nation, not just, in certain portions of our region or our state even. Anything else, Chase?
No, that's it. Thank you, Matt and Chloe.
Erica had one comment about it's worth considering when you're scoring the competitive applications, the prioritization of home buyer or owner and home buyer versus investor owned, and is a 100% investor owned mobile manufactured housing community as competitive as an owner, and that will be something that's great feedback, and we'll think through that when we get into if we're awarded and if we get into the program development. Any other questions from those on the phone or camera?
I have.
Matt, there's one more in the chat.
I was going to come back to it.
Miss Ritchie has a question about tax credits.
Okay,
And Miss
perfect.
Ritchie, could you go ahead and explain, there's many kinds of tax credits, and if you could clarify what you are asking about, then I think we can answer your question.
Sure. My question is, if you all is awarded the grant, and of course, in the process of agencies submitting applications, I represent SERCAP Incorporated. And if, for example, SERCAP was granted funding, and we decided to purchase a piece of land to put some manufactured homes on to potentially rent and or sell, for the units that are going to be rented, could you apply to Virginia Housing for the 4 or 9% tax credits for this particular project?
Honestly, be a question for Virginia Housing. We don't have any control or influence over that program. I do know that there are minimum design and construction requirements at Virginia Housing. And so my first thought, and this is an uneducated guess, my first thought is that the types of homes that are eligible under price funding would not meet those minimum design and construction requirements, but I don't know that for sure. And so I would direct you to Stephanie Flanders and Phil Cunningham at Virginia Housing, the director and assistant director of the tax credit program, and they would be able to provide more straightforward advice.
Thank you. When it comes down to ensuring that the families are low to moderate income, when you're layering it with other programs such as tax credits, project-based vouchers, that's going to ensure that you are definitively going to be housing individuals that are low to moderate income households.
Appreciate that feedback. We'll even circle back with Virginia Housing to kind of, fully think it through, because that and definitely sounds pretty nice. There's a couple chats, and so construction has to be done by September 31st, 2027, and that is in the NOFO by HUD. That could change with updated NOFOs. They have a press conference tomorrow, I think, with potentially some updated guidance, so that could change. Again, if we were to get under contract, I'm sorry, construction is done by September 31, 2031. So that is then all close out of the program is September 32. So you have 8 years to fully close out and be done. We hope to award funds. If we're awarded funding, we would hope to have the first round of projects awarded and under contract by the end of 25, if I remember correctly. So then Vaughn has a good comment about mobile homes being outside of a park and having them be more scattered throughout the county. Would we consider administering these funds in a scattered site program, which is basically a CDBG term that allows for funds to hit, one house individually as opposed to a concentration or a neighborhood? Vaughn, I think we are trying to keep this flexible. We'll put that. I don't know that we have to address that fully in the application to HUD, but we can give consideration because, yeah, I think your point could work even in suburban areas too. Ms. Wolf, to the consideration of our evaluation on scoring, I don't know that we've gone in full detail or extensive thoughts on kind of prioritization of funds. So it is hard to discern how DHCD is going to prioritize the replacement or repair of existing mobile homes over the creation of new limited manufacturing unit clusters in rural areas. I think that's a valid point. I think we can try to consider some of that. And if you have thoughts one way or the other, how we should prioritize scoring, we'd happily have that input to help us make those decisions. And nonprofits be able to apply jointly, or could a locality and a nonprofit apply jointly? I think without having fully thought out, again, the application, initially, it seems like it would be permissible to have partnerships and agreements in place between entities to fulfill an application for competition. Chloe, you have any thoughts?
Generally speaking, the way DHCD handles that is that we have a lead applicant in our application management system called CAMS, and then we would require MOUs to be submitted if we were evaluating both members of the partnership, or the MOUs could exist outside of the application process, depending on which program we're thinking about. So I think there is nothing that would preclude a nonprofit and a locality from applying together, but typically we have a lead applicant who is the primary recipient of funding from DHCD, and that's true across programs. Even through the CDBG program, the locality is the lead applicant and then may subgrant or subcontract out different activities in that contract to area nonprofits.
And there may be, when we get to that phase, if we're so lucky, some ways to help guide you in those conversations to develop those partnerships that will, align with the application or the project for implementation down the line. So Vaughn's comment about experience that's not financially beneficial nor structurally feasible to rehabilitate mobile homes. Yeah, that's been a limitation in a lot of funding opportunities. And so that's why this is a good opportunity to try to think through preserving some of those. But when preservation is not an option, the replacement is allowable. And we'll be able to, help guide you through some of that if we're awarded funds and have that program materials. Sharon says if a mix of mobile home parks, somewhere owners own their own land and somewhere it is an investor. Just to clarify, if the city of Virginia Beach could be an applicant and use the funds to replace mobile homes on a lot that is owned versus rented, if so, would we also have to follow the HUD environmental regs to include home not in an accident potential zone? So short answer is we don't know fully because we're applying to this program and we haven't developed even the environmental regulations that will have to follow with this as on top of what the state might put on top of HUD's regulations for the environmental review process. I'd say the short answer is if it's a HUD program, they're going to make you do HUD regulations and different aspects. So don't know the exact answer to that, and we can think through that if we're awarded funds, but I would bet we have to follow HUD environmental regulations with this funds. I'm not sure how we can get around that. And then to Ms. Wolf, to your question about if including modulars versus as well as manufactured housing is allowable through price, I'm not positive. We'll get some better guidance. I may have misspoke or mistyped that in the PowerPoint, but I think even if we can only do manufactured housing, there might be opportunities of braiding funds where you could do modular in a community that is also receiving price funds, just maybe not paid for our price. So that's an abstract way of saying, don't know exactly, but we'll find out and we'll make sure that's clear in our application as well as in future guidance back to you all. And actually, Rachel already answered that. And lastly, should nonprofits have experience or a history of building with mobile or manufactured homes to qualify for funds? Again, don't have that answer right now. Generally, some experience or partnering with someone that has experience with the construction field is advantageous to an application, but I don't know that it's an absolute, and we'll be able to answer that much more clearly once we have kind of the input session. If awarded funds, we can really go into how to build the best application, what projects are going to really meet the intent for price through DHCD, and what may not. I will say that, to Chloe's point earlier, there are several regions around the state that are applying for price too. It may be worth asking your locality or your regional planning district commission if they're involved in some of these. It's not a slight if they are not, but we want to make sure that you're connected to anyone that potentially has access to this program so that you can utilize it to its fullest in your region or in your area. Any more questions, comments? As I still have the slide up on there, and again, we'll make this presentation available on our website by the end of this week. You can click on the links. Chloe in the chat put the feedback.ppc@dhc.virginia.gov email. So we would love to have your comments, your input on what we should prioritize, your questions, or even why would you even go after this funding? You can ask us anything or tell us all of your great thoughts. Vaughn has another question. Will there be funding for well and septic improvements in the funding? Yes, so that would be part of infrastructure. Thinking through if it's best to keep it that way, if there's a centralized option or what have you, that would be part of infrastructure allowances. If it's the scattered site, we may have to think through one of scattered sites, the best choice, how we do it, and then how that looks when you think through well and septic there. But again, that would be, if we're awarded funds, we can try to circle back and think through the best use of funds to meet the needs locally. Chase, one more question, or as many as you want, but another question.
Sorry, one more question. This is the last one.
worries.
So it sounds like DHCD doesn't quite have the application together yet. So I was curious if a municipality or other counties out there, maybe they're just hearing about it and they're kind of late to the party, and they just want to do it countywide and they don't have the time to do the engineering studies, the income surveys, that sort of thing. Is there a broad application they could still submit and try to meet those deadlines? Like, is that possible, or is it kind of just the deadline's too far gone at this point?
I won't speak to their capacity, but the deadline for HUD is July 10th now. So it now is extended. That gives any entity, localities, or the ones that are eligible for a HUD funding to apply. So yes, there's a pretty extensive public hearing or notice of public participation requirement on this. That's hence why we're having this now, even though it's not due for a month. We want to make sure we're hitting those requirements. So you could definitely reach out and ask if they want to do that and if they think it's feasible.
Okay. Otherwise, they don't have to have like a formal construction plans or income surveys for one specific project. They could maybe be a little bit more vague and still hit the application window as long as they have that public hearings, is what your understanding is.
I would recommend taking a look at the price program on the HUD website and seeing what the requirements are. There is limiting requirements, certain size, certain thresholds of expenditures, and different aspects that qualify. So it may not be for every locality to be able to do that, but it's worth looking at and familiarizing yourself with the program and the opportunities, and then thinking through with the locality or other partners as to applying.
Okay,
Chase,
sounds good. I appreciate it.
Chase, I put that link, the HUD program offices link to the Price website in the chat. It's also on the CPD website. If you just search Price NOFO, NOFO, it comes up on HUD Exchange or on the HUD.gov site. And just to be clear, the July 10 application is for any application to HUD. And so DHCD does not have our sub-application written yet, but our draft application to HUD is available currently on our website and does sort of outline the way that we envision creating a program. But ultimately, we would not create a full-fledged application with LMI surveys and things of that nature until we knew whether or not we were funded by HUD. So we don't anticipate creating that application until at the earliest, the end of this year, depending on notification of awards by HUD.
Got it. So Chloe, just so I understand you correctly, another municipality could essentially do the same thing, and they don't have to have those surveys in line right this moment. It's just if they're awarded, they would have to provide that documentation at that point. Is that essentially correct?
There are narrative questions that sort of generally approach this kind of information. And so depending on the kind of project that the locality or the applicant to HUD is, depending on the project envisioned by the applicant, different amounts of information are requested by HUD as part of that application. But you can see the full narrative questions, all of the attachments, all of the requirements for submitting to HUD on that price website. And I would say any applicant, I wouldn't provide technical assistance to another applicant for a program that I'm applying for the first time.
Yeah.
There's HUD has had a number of webinars that go through expectations post-award, the NEPA requirements, uniform relocation requirements, walking through the attachments to the application. So I would recommend reviewing the HUD provided information because we have not been, this is a first time grant and we have not been a successful applicant yet. So I wouldn't take our advice on the application necessarily.
Got it. Appreciate it, Chloe.
Sure.
I think I give really solid advice, Chloe. I don't know what you're talking about. Just kidding. Just kidding. So there's a couple more questions. And so Ms. Jones, the question about assisting mobile home repairs, that is part of the program, repair, replace, preserve, definitely a part of what we're asking HUD from with the price funds. Vaughn, we're hoping for a fall, winter 2024 notification of award. That's anticipated, and as we've seen now, we've gone from early June to now, early to mid-July for an application due date. That could be indicative of, not knowing exactly when we'll get those awards. But our timeline's built on end of calendar year 24 to be awarded, and 25 build the program and have some of the first awards out the door by the end of 2025. So that's a great question. And Amanda Healy, I'm sorry I didn't answer yours earlier, but Ms. Wolf, you said, since it's CDBG related, are we going to follow kind of the entitlement area, non-entitlement area, which is kind of those metropolitan areas versus rural guidelines? I don't believe so. Chloe, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a statewide program. We're not defined by what the CDBG program is, especially since this is kind of new funding through HUD that just has some similarities to CDBG with the low to moderate income benefit. We anticipate being able to use these funds if we're awarded in a statewide competitive application. Thus, any eligible applicant across the state could apply for it.
That's correct. So the ways in which this is built on the CDBG framework is the 24 CFR Part 570. So the CFR is one of those, the eligible activity types are built around CDBG. We have to meet one of the 3 national objectives on any particular eligible activity, which includes things like the low to mod benefit, clearing slumber blight, or urgent need. But we are not required to have a project that exists solely within a non-entitlement area. That is one exception to the structure of this versus CDBG.
I know we've gone over a little bit of what the time we allotted. If you have any additional questions, comments, please do let us know. We will try to at least circulate a link or something to all the registrants that were participated in it or at least registered for today, just so you know our next steps going forward. Do very much thank you all for being on this and walking through kind of the price application with us at DHCD. So we'll stick around for a few minutes if you have any questions, but otherwise, email, chat, or read the application and let us know what you think. Thank you all so much. Hope you have a great day.